Right, just wait a minute. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Out of Nowhere. Well, my guest today is Joanna Summerskills, and it's quite a few years since I interviewed you. It could be 5, it could be 6 years ago. So
I was thinking it was like 5.
I'm going to say I've been doing radio since 2014. So it's quite a few years.
Well, I think I met you at the 2019 Awakening in Manchester conference.
Yes, you did. Yeah. Hey, time flies, doesn't it?
Crazy. It is.
It does, yeah. I know we want to touch on a bit on the on Bill's case. The 44-based ex-soldier's true story of lifelong encounters involving alien and abduction.
I know. It is the craziest case. Would you like me to dive into that, Bob? Are you happy to do that?
First, I'm going to say, what first drew you into Bill's Brooks story, and why did you feel it needed to be told?
Okay, so I will also say that my strapline has often been disclosure with exposure. And when Mike, well, so his name is Mike Smith. He went under the name Bill Brooks on the book because at the time of writing, he had had several heart attacks and strokes.
Oh my God.
Was very unwell and was sure he was about to die. This was in 2012, and I'd started the Amash project in 2011, and he'd heard me talking on some TV program, I can't think which one it would have been now, that long ago, and mentioning the military element, the My Labs, that kind of thing. And he thought, oh, if she is able to talk about that, then maybe she'll listen to me, because for 20 years he had been trying to get people to take him seriously, and he had no luck. He was ridiculed and isolated, and then he had other very peculiar paranormal events and also serious persecution by the Freemasons, which nearly cost him and his family their lives at their hands. For various reasons, but we don't need to get into that bit. So what I mean is he had a lot to handle. Not only that, I hadn't heard anything like his story remotely before. This wasn't just contact or ET or ET abduction. It's both for him. It was an entire slew of events that began happening as a small child, maybe 2 or 3. He was born in 1950, so 1952 or 3, when it all began, and he had zero memory, not a flash, not a glimmer, until it seems ET, in this case the Greys, were ready for him to know and triggered a download just as he happened to have come over the, guess what, Berwyn Mountain, coming from a gig in Porthcawl, I think, somewhere that direction. And he lived over Oswestry Way, which took him over the Berwyn Mountain. And I mentioned the Berwyn Mountain in that way because in about 74, we know there was an alleged crash there.
Yeah.
Of a UFO. And during the time that he came back over the mountain there, he lost 26 miles of time. We can say we go on automatic pilot when we drive. I've done it myself. I don't think I've lost that much time, lack of awareness, consciousness. I mean, I know it's competent consciousness because you're completely competent when you're driving. And so was he. He wasn't drunk or anything. He'd just come back from work. And it was about sort of getting to the 2 a.m. time. But so this focused my attention on the experiencer event, on the human experience and the aftermath of the non-human encounters of all kinds. And, the impact for the experiencer and what that meant, our evolution, consciousness, spirituality, and the inevitable paradigm shift that this leaves the individual with. We can have our paradigm shift, you and I say, Bob, by being connected with these wonderful folks, I haven't had an ET experience like he's had. I've had a strange sighting, which kind of blew me away, and I can tell you about that if we ever get time. But and that happened on the eve of my maiden podcast, my maiden evening of my podcast in 2014, as it happens. Anyway, we won't go into that. To get back to Mike, because his story is so complex and long and absolutely amazing. And so what we'll talk about, I sent you a composite picture of Mike so you can kind of see him through the ages. So from when he was a soldier, and there are his parents. It just is headed Mike Smith, experiencer, ex-soldier, entertainer, and author.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go. And that just gives a good timeline of him. And that picture on the extreme right is of him holding his new baby. And that's not long before he had the download, which is when, as I said, the ETs triggered this very much NDE-like experience, where he saw his entire life flashing before him. And Mike was a person from the Black Country part of England. That's the West Midlands. Wordsley was his main area, not too far from Stourbridge, and very poor, but everybody was very poor. So I didn't think it was anything unusual, you know, no cars, no TVs, that kind of thing. And very much he had no education. He was a bit of a maverick. He was a very intelligent guy, not in the academic learned way, but in the natural intelligence of being very connected with animals, and nature to an extent. Animals were naturally drawn to him, things like that. And that's not the case with everybody. So fascinating stuff with Mike. So I'm just going to read you a little bit that I wrote, and it is that just to keep me on track here. It says, Mike was an ex-soldier and musician who was oblivious to all things ET. He didn't believe in the paranormal, spirituality, anything in that direction. And as I said, he was born in the Black Country, and he wasn't living in the Black Country at the time of his download. He'd moved over to the Oswestry area. And he was, how he could have been so closed-minded to his own experiences is just astonishing. He even said that to me at the end of one of our field trips, because we spent quite a bit of time together, not only on the phone with me writing and Skype and getting his story down, but also I did 3 field trips with him in 2012, 14 and 17, going to all the major locations where he had these incredible events, and in even the download event. We sat outside that bungalow and just wondered, really, how did this happen? So in 1994, when he was 44, hence the title of the book, that is when he had his download. And as I said, he was just returning home from a gig. It was about 2 a.m. And at this point, his whole life, so he got this download in a matter of moments. I mean, it could have been, you can't tell. Nobody who's had these events seemed to be able to, be cognizant of the actual time factor. Sometimes it feels like seconds and it's actually minutes, or the other way around. So he said it was instant, and everything that he had never believed suddenly was appearing in his live stream path. All the elements of the ET, and he'd had several different encounters with reptilians, the Nordics, the Greys, and shadow beings, and men in black, if you want to call them. They were, those men in black that I refer to were allied to the Area 51 base out in Sennelager, Germany, where he was stationed in 1968 as a new young soldier. But we'll come to that maybe another time. So after he had this NDE, I mean, you imagine having a set of values and, kind of roadmap for life, and then suddenly that is completely shaken up and shattered. And he spent almost 2 years thinking that he was having a full-on mental breakdown. And he said, I became an alcoholic. I tried to drown myself out of it. And what's very interesting is that there were lots of consequences to Mike's abductions in the workplace, which is absolutely fascinating, that he was completely unaware of and was only noticed by virtue of timing, i.e. he'd go out on a job and he should have been like 3/4 of an hour there, 3/4 of an hour back. And in fact, he was 3 or 4 hours later, and he had no memory of that. He just said, what are you talking about, to the bosses, about where have you been? He said, well, I don't know. I've just been there and I've been back, and, have you? And meanwhile, nearly 1/4 ton, or it could have even been 1/3 of a ton of a metal, which apparently is very precious, even more precious than gold, phosphor bronze, a massive piece, like a massive ball bearing, which was used in the shipping business. He'd collected it, and obviously on his way back, he'd been mugged by ET because they nicked it. So, I mean, and this was a very, very expensive piece.
Of course it was, yeah.
It was hugely expensive. I mean, they showed him the clock. They said, but it's this time, and he knew exactly with his timing. He knew what it should have been, and he said, even though they showed me the clock, like it was 4 o'clock, let's say, he said, I couldn't, because it should have been 12:30, something like that. He said, I couldn't. He said, I just thought they were being difficult. He always thought that the people who challenged him on something, they weren't being awful, but they were just trying to do their jobs, get on with it, unload the metal. And because after they said, where have you been? And he said, well, I've just been there and back. They said, oh, well, at least let's unload the metal. And the metal was not there. This 1/3 of a 1/4 of a ton of phosphor bronze. So you wonder what ET wants with a 1/4 of a ton of phosphor bronze. I don't know. But these were, and from that point of view with his job, he was so, I don't know, discombobulated. He really couldn't wrap his head around it. And so the only recourse he had to kind of save his face and to try and wrap his feelings around what was going on, thinking that it was a human-led attack on him somehow, something to discredit him, although he couldn't understand about the metal because he'd picked it up. He saw them load it into the van and off he drove. And that was the last memory he had, apart from getting back, driving in, unaware that he'd been intercepted on the way and robbed. It wasn't the first time they robbed him either.
No, it sounds like it.
Yeah. So he's been, he's experienced these time displacements for a long time. One of the other major time displacements, and I won't go into the whole event, is an event called the Abingdon incident, which is probably the most incredible event, because when he had the download, imagine, pouring a huge bucket, as somebody said on the Eclectia album, imagine somebody pouring a huge bucket of memories into your head, but the bucket, hugely enormous, and you've got this little cavity of a brain space. And he said all the memories came in, and it was like some were parked sort of at the back. He said, I knew they were there, but the Abingdon event was front and center. And he said, and I remembered most of it. He didn't have any regression at all. And the memories, the ones that were parked, because it was just too much of a head-breaking, mind-boggling event for him to countenance the myriad events that he had from childhood onwards, to suddenly just, reconcile himself that this was part of his life. He had no one to talk to about it. And also he'd ridiculed and poo-pooed everybody else. So imagine, I mean, the poor thing really, hoist with his own petard a bit there, but because of his attitude. But all this is like education, isn't it? And evolution, because it opened up in him a lot of things. As I said, he wasn't schooled academically. In fact, when he went into the army, which we'll get onto in a minute, he really couldn't read or write. And the army said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll kind of teach you." Um, so anyway, just getting back to all of this. So he had also been very poorly on and off in between all of these events, particularly toward the latter part when I got to know him. And because it kind of boggled my brain, it took me a long time to assimilate his story and to really see if this man was real. I'd got his army records. I knew I'd photographed those. They're in the book. So I knew that was real. I'd had on my own show a lovely man called John. Sorry, I forget his surname at the moment, but he was actually in the army at the same time as Mike was, and
good.
at the time. And he spoke to me on my interview with him about an incredible paranormal event that happened at the Senalaga barracks, which is near Paderborn. This is Senalaga, and these guys shared this base, which was a nuclear base, unheard of in 1968, and which they had to sign the Official Secrets Act for, and the Area 51 personnel, which they were not allowed to fraternize with, worked underground with the Honest John rockets. So, very super weird things that went on at that base, let me tell you. So I sent you also just the image of the cover of the book. I don't know if you want to show that, because it really isn't for the faint-hearted, this book. The poor thing. I mean, he, as I said, he used the pseudonym Bill Brooks on the cover. Although he didn't write it, I wanted to have his name on there because I think he deserved it. But he really feared for his and his young.
That one, the book.
That's right. It's the book. Just so people can recognize it if they're looking for it on Amazon or anything. But it is an amazing story, because this is a no-nonsense kind of guy who was a nice man. He was a good man. He might have been a bit of a roustabout when he was younger, but he was a decent human being, and he just had no reference, no template, no point of any access to what had been going on. And I recently completed an almost 2-hour documentary called Mike Smith Unplugged, which is it encompasses all our 2012, 14, and 17 location interviews and kind of sightings there. We didn't have a sighting so much as event locations there, and so we'll see if the world is ready for this. Sadly, the technology even back in 2012 and 14 wasn't fabulous for me, just being little old me out there with my phone and recording him, and the other recording I was doing was terrible because I had a faulty piece of equipment. But anyway, it's put together and it's entered into a film festival, the Rain Dance Film Festival, and we'll see if it's been accepted, because it's got to be of a certain standard. So let's see if they like it. So
I'm sure they will do.
And unfortunately, the protagonist of his own story, Mike Smith, left planet Earth on October 23 of, I think, 13, 2023, October.
Yeah, that's right.
And you've got a picture of him in a black top, I think, with if you want to show. You don't have to show it if you want, if it's easier for you not to.
No.
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
But it just shows him. That was when he was quite well. That was in about 2000, and was that my 2017 one? He did look really well. That was when he looked well. But after that, he really began to, decline.
Yeah.
He had various cancers and stuff. And in the end, when we used to speak on the phone, the sad thing is that he had a stroke that took out his guitar arm. Oh, what tragedy that is! And then it took away his voice. So when we spoke, we would speak for about no more than 5 minutes. Then his voice would be gone.
How sad.
Oh yeah, it was, and I was. I have done a really, I think it's nice, representative 1-hour video of an obituary called "Death of a Legend," Mike Smith has left the building.
Ah,
And that's on my YouTube channel. Now, I have sent you the YouTube link to my channel. Do you want me to read it out, or do you want to somehow attach it later? You tell me what you'd like.
oh, you can read it out.
Okay, so it is just all the HTTPS and all the rest of that youtube.com/@ and it's capital TH the ET newsroom. So the capital T for on the and ETN of the ET newsroom is capitalized as well. So and if you put in the search bar or the search area once you get to the site and just put in Mike Smith obituary or death of a legend, it will come up. So it's very interesting because he wrote a couple of songs which sadly didn't make it onto my album, which we can talk about shortly. There's so many things. I mean, I could spend 2 or 3 days just talking about Mike Smith. I mean, they'd be 8-hour days. Really, his experiences were so extraordinary. To go into the detail of it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one more story before I go on to the eclectia element, because that is fascinating as well. And that is an album that I created, which I published in 2018, featuring musicians who are experiencers. So how about that? Either of the ET, full-on contact, UFO, spirituality, paranormal, et al. So very amazing stuff. But what I wanted to tell you about Displaced Time, another interesting thing with Mike Smith, is that when he was in the army in '68, most of the men were at what's called practice camp, which is an annual event where they do live firing rounds and that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was at a different location to his camp where he was. So when he arrived, there were only maybe 16, 17 guys there, and another guy called John, who was a little bit older than Mike. And Mike was 18 at this time. And so these guys were sent to, just as part of a bit of an exercise to go, there's the Senalaga Rangers, and anybody who's been in the army and to that area will know them. And it's basically, they were on like a bit of a training thing for a faux attack, that kind of thing. And so he and John were sent there, and they was just sitting there for a couple of hours, really having a cigarette and chatting. And there was, you know, they were on their own. There was nobody there. It was just a great big open field. And so anyway, they began to see this orange mist coming from the distance toward them. And John said, oh, I bet that's like a simulated gas attack kind of thing. Let's go and tell the rest. So the NCO and everybody seemed to be sleeping. So they went up and said, hello, we've got this, you know, fake gas attack. Do we need to get the gas masks on and do all the, you know, routine practice? And he said, oh no, we've been stood down for a but nobody told Mike and John, so they'd been left.
Oh my God.
Twiddling their thumbs anyway. So the boys find the top of a Saracen vehicle to sleep in. I'm not quite sure why they're not in barracks. I can't remember that bit. But anyway, they've got cam nets and all the rest of it on the top. And as they're having a cigarette, you know, about to bed down, they might notice there's something else. And the something else is, he said they look like sort of as if flares had been let off, and in a fair close distance. And he describes it more in the book, but I won't go on to that, because all of a sudden, as he's looking at these flares, he's also looking down. So they're on top of the van, looking down, and he sees all the men in unison, almost in lockstep, walking. Well, actually, they looked like they were floating, he says.
Oh, God.
Away from them to a point that he could see, not quite see. So he stood up and he said to his friend John, I'm going to check this out. This is very weird, kind of thing. So as he's about to get down the side of the van, the Saracen, John shouts at him, no, don't go, because what John could see is from the woods behind them were some men, armed men, approaching in black with guns. And but anyway, Mike being Mike, he scootles down the side, and as he lands and he's looking for where the men have gone, You can see this point of light a little bit further away from him, not too far. And all of a sudden there's this, and he says he believes they were American sounding, bearing in mind they're sharing a base with Area 51 personnel that they're not supposed to fraternize with. And this guy who had a flash, I think on his right arm, he doesn't remember what the flash was, like a badge, all in black, with something of a crew cut. He said he thought he was blonde. All of a sudden says, walk into the light. And Mike, being Mike, because he was a little bit of a rebel, he was walking to the light. And this guy cocks the gun, and he said it was like a Beretta, not a Beretta, bigger than a Beretta, but like that.
Right.
And got the gun right in his face and said, now walk into the light. So he did. The next thing he remembers is the morning. And his friend John whispers over to him and he says, do you remember what happened last night? Mike goes, no, what? And they're standing on parade. They find themselves, Mike finds himself, standing on parade with a few other men, with 2 or 3 of these others, men in black. Now, these aren't the other men in black I'm talking about, but they were men in black with the same pistols, ready to point them at the men. Or point them. And the big brass there saying, and you will not speak about the events of last night. You will say nothing to no one at all. And he got them all to sign another Official Secrets Act. Now, so John said, don't you remember what happened? And Mike goes, no, he just, honestly, Mike is so locked out to what's gone on. And John says, we were abducted. And Mike goes, yeah, right. How much have you been drinking? Laughs. I mean, bless him. And he notices, though, the dress of the other men are semi-battle dress, the fatigues that they would wear, maybe that we associate more with the late 50s. It was a crossover time. The late 50s were a time when the battle dress, the army uniform, was being changed to the fatigues that we're more familiar with today. But he did notice that some, but it was a transition period. So it's not that crazy that some men would be, say, have the trousers of a battle fatigue or the jacket, and maybe they hadn't quite got the kit all in yet.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mention this because we're going to roll on 40 years. 40 years. John and Mike have not seen or spoken to each other since they were in the army. And Mike doesn't even remember where he was barracked, he said, I don't even remember. I don't remember John being around much. But he didn't, because Mike was Mike at that time, he didn't think anything much of it. And then 40 years on, so he's about 60, so this might be 2000, where are we? 2010, something like that.
Yeah.
He found the phone number for, I think his name was Jed, the brother of John, and in trying to locate John. And this is the only number he can find. And he realizes it's the brother. So he's speaking away. And he said, I really want to get hold of John, because now at this point in 2010, Mike has already had his download in 1994, has been, all the releasing of information has been percolating through, as well as the Abingdon incident, and he's remembering the army stuff, right?
Right.
So he wants to talk to John about the abductions, because there was more than one, and I won't go into them. But needless to say, so he's speaking to Jed, and Jed says to him, well, and this is to do with the time factor difference. And Jed said, well, he won't speak to you. He won't speak to anybody, because he's become a recluse for all of these years. And he's locked himself away, telling people he's being abducted by aliens. And Mike goes, oh, well, that's what I want to speak to him about. And John said, what? Well, he said, well, I met you in the army, because Jed joined in the army, and Mike knew he'd met Jed, I think once or twice briefly. So he knew that Jed was, you know, a reality, if you like, and he'd actually seen the brothers, John and Jed, have a fight in the army, and was about to step in, and you know, the other guy said, no, 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 not between brothers. You leave brothers alone to work it out, kind of thing. Anyway, so there was that little, you know, incident that embedded the brother, if you like, in Mike's mind, and then Jed said to him, anyway, when were you in the army? What, you know, what year? And Mike said, well, 1968 I joined. That's when I met John. He went, no, that's not possible. He said, we were in the late 50s.
Oh.
Honest to God, it is. This guy has had some unbelievable
It sounds like it.
events. I mean, to read the whole thing, you'll get the whole kind of background and foreground as things move on, and it really is, you know, something else. And it said he was a musician, and he created a couple of really funny cod songs about the CIA and dancing with the alien, which are absolutely fantastic. They didn't make it onto the album because the day that we were going to record him, because we just got an old scratchy recording, but at least we've got that, which I transferred from the tape to CD and MP3, of course.
Yeah.
He was ill. He was too poorly
Oh.
to record, which was a real shame because we'd got a studio and a band together. And anyway, it is what it is. And so there are so many more stories to tell about Mike, but we'll come back to him if we have time.
Yeah.
I do want to go on to Eclectia, and the reason is because it's an international compilation album, and it's pretty unique. It's probably a world first, actually, because it comprises not only songs, and the album does not have a genre of music. The genre is in the fact that all the musicians and all the contributors have that X-Files factor about them, whether they be researchers, scientists, or the musicians themselves, including myself. I'm
right.
Including. So it's pretty exciting, and we were really lucky. And also the second documentary I created, called Eclectic Insights. I don't know if you want to show the album cover. Is also in the wings, waiting for response from the film festival folks. So we'll again know about that next year, and that's based on 7 interviews that I did with some of the people who feature on that album cover, which is on Sergeant Pepper's, of course.
There you go.
That's lovely. So anyway, it features people like Grant Cameron, Chris Bledsoe, and science-orientated remote viewers and dowsers. And this 2-hour feature documentary, as I said, called Eclectic Insights, I think is that disclosure with exposure. It's us. It's almost like we're around the dining room table chatting about our experience, and they're really opening up. They're not holding back, because it's not often you get several experiences together of this ilk. When I say this ilk, what I mean, I don't mean to give anybody brownie points about their experience. What I mean is that the depth and length of their experiences and the time that it's been in their lives is significant, and the changes to their lives have been significant. So what I wanted to say is that we were really lucky to have Daniel Vallely. I don't think Daniel is on the Eclectia album front cover there, but you see him just to the left as you look at him in the little tank top there, or waistcoat, I'm not quite sure. But anyway, but he's a graphic designer. Yeah, you may not be able to see him there, but he's a graphic designer, musician. Yeah, he's just on the left there. Yeah, you probably can't see him. Anyway, thank you very much, Bob, for that. It's always difficult with images, isn't it? But anyway, so Daniel is from Scotland, graphic designer, as I said, experienced musician, and he created the fabulous artwork. There is some other artwork that I've sent you, which is the 2 CDs, because we created a double CD album with the
There you go.
isn't that amazing? So that's
That is.
yeah, that's one.
And then the other one is.
Yeah, it's so it's the other one. Yeah,
There
album
you go.
track 2. That's lovely. So again, you see the owls, you see the spinning top, which had something to do with Daniel's experience, and so his fascinating experiences also include having an alien implant, and it's located interestingly on the right side of his brain. Now, Grant Cameron was told that, but I think by Dr. Roger Lear, who I had the good fortune to meet just briefly before he passed, indicated that most implants are on the left side, but in this case, that's not true, not the case. And you can see it if you go to the Eclectia website. You can actually see a blown up image of the 2010 brain scan showing Daniel's, and I didn't give that to you actually, so.
No, that's
You
fine.
just have to. The Eclectia website is, so we start with the HTTPS, and I'll just say this so people can play it back for reference if they want. So it's and the double slash, it's VET Newsroom, all one word, .wixsite.com// Eclectia release. And there's a full, I did send you the image with the newspaper, I think, Bob. Again, don't worry if you haven't got it. It just shows it's the first landing page of the yeah, there it is, and it just says, well, you can probably read it better than I can. And yeah, I forget what it says without looking again at it. But
Alien abduction stories inspired album creation.
yeah, there we go, which is really exciting to see. So and you can go to the gallery section, which is where all the images are on that website, the Eclectia website, and see for yourself if you like the implant. Now, what was interesting, I'm just going to back up slightly, talking about Dan Vallely, who's pretty much a lifelong experiencer. Started when he was a little one. Not going to talk about that bit. You'll be able to hear it eventually in the Eclectia documentary, because I did not only a 2-hour documentary, which I've submitted to a film festival, but I did a 10-hour docu-series, sort of 45-minute each episodes, documenting the same 7 people. And so you can hear those folks talking really at length about their experience, which is very interesting. Now, those 2 are not out in the public domain yet, because to submit to a film festival, you can't have it in the public domain, but it will be. And for anybody who's interested, who's on the in any other professional form that would like to see it for professional reasons, you can contact me, and if it fits the bill, then it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that I could send you a private link. So I'm just saying that not to be deceptive or anything. It's just the way the rules go at the moment. So so anyway, this album also is it's international. It features Canadians, Americans, and the Brits. I've only been able to work with the Brits to get as much as I can on interviews face to face. So the documentary features the Brits, and I have interviewed most of the Americans and Canadians, and will eventually get that into some kind of documentary form as well via their interviews, which will be amazing. But yeah, and so there's a coffee book waiting in the wings, which will be amazing, because there'll be lots of amazing images in there. And likewise, one of the people on the album is sadly another wonderful person who's left us. I think he only left us last year. Steve Boucher. Did I send you his image? Steve Boucher and his band Harmony Grove. The entire band was abducted. I think I don't know if anybody else's complete band was taken with them following a gig about 1974, which is amazing, and with a regression from with Aphrodite Clamar, who was a psychologist who worked with Bud Hopkins,
Oh yeah.
he was able to recall just about everything that happened during that abduction event, and it was astonishing stuff. Really, really interesting. So, and it's quite interesting because with Steve, he has something that not many people can recall, and that's a pre-birth memory. And you might have there, Bob, a couple of images of a grey ET, one a 3D image and one. He was also a fine artist, was Steve, very good one. And his name is Rigel, his man. So that's the 3D, the 3D image and the sketch that Steve did of Rigel. And I'll just tell you this because I think it's quite interesting. Steve remembers being on a high place, he said, looking down on Earth. And he thinks it was the moon. He thinks it was the moon because of the sort of distance that he could see the Earth from, and the high place. And he was standing there with Rigel, who is this grey. Of course, at the time, he didn't know his name was Rigel. And he really didn't want to go down. And Rigel was saying, well, why not? He said, oh, no, he said, I really don't like it. I prefer not to. And all of the rest of this. Anyway, there was a bit of sort of resistance, to say the least, on Steve's part. And he said, because he said, I think it must have been my first time on Earth. He said, because I really didn't want to do it. And then Rigel said, well, look, there's somebody just come back from Earth. Would you like to talk to them? Do you think it would help? And Steve said, well, okay, then maybe. And so he finds himself in this room with this man. I don't know whether he's just sitting on a chair or something like that. And so Steve says, well, how did you find your time on Earth? Was it good or bad? And the guy says, well, a bit of both, really. And Steve was then, questioning him about, more details. And he said, well, would you go back? And the man said, well, he said, quite forlornly, I have to. I didn't finish my mission.
Oh.
And from that, Steve understood that he'd probably killed himself, committed suicide, cut the contract short.
Oh.
So had to go back. And then Steve was still, when Rigel saw him again, and he said to Steve, well, did that help? Did that make you feel better? And Steve goes, no, not really. Not at all. I really don't want to go. And Rigel said, but you have to. It's like the council have said so. And Mike was saying, Bill, I beg your pardon. Steve was saying, well, I really don't want to go. And Rigel said, well, if you don't go, you could end up being somewhere worse. And that he actually took umbrage at that. He said, I treated that as a threat. I thought that was not okay. Anyway, so he said, okay, then I guess I just have to go. And Rigel said, yeah, you do. And then Steve said to Rigel, would you come and see me? And I went, whoa, we're not supposed to do that. He said, well, if I know that you'll come to see me, allay my fears, help me through anything. He said, I would feel better about going. So Rigel said, well, we don't normally do this. He said, but yes, I will. I'll come and see you throughout your time at various points, which he did. He upheld his end of the bargain. So that was amazing. But I haven't heard many pre-birth memories, and I probably haven't given you all the details either. Steve wrote a book called Beyond the Extraterrestrial Firewall, which is out on Amazon still, I believe, which gives, the lowdown. And in my interviews, I did 2 episodes with him, which will be part of the coffee table book as well, and be part of the American and Canadian film when I get that done. It's a bit difficult when you're kind of doing everything yourself, and you haven't got any other technicians or any other resources or expertise to access. So it takes the time it takes, doesn't it? So just before I get to any questions that you have, because I know you've got a few, I wanted to talk has become as well, because it's the basis of an exciting developing project which I hope will span a couple of days in summer 2026. Just, you know, how long away are we from that? Very, very close actually. So
Yes.
I don't know if I can get it done in time, but if not, maybe it'll be 2027. But I'm hoping, fingers crossed, it'll be summer 2026. And that is the Eclectia Multimedia Music Festival. And that will be, again, something quite groundbreaking, because we'll be having films, we'll be having presentations, special guests. And in the second part of the both days, they'll be featuring the music, not only from the album, but any others that have ET UFO related themes that have something to do with the Eclectic album. So it is going to be really exciting. And we're hoping that it'll be in the UK first and then migrate to the States and maybe even Canada as well. Who knows, depending on what games are played by those who are pulling the strings around and about. So, did you want to ask me a few questions, or would you like me to? I've got some notes that I can continue with back to Mike, for example, if you'd like me to talk about the serial killer element.
Oh, yes. The serial
weird
killer.
Experience.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Are you sure you're okay for time?
Yeah, we're all right. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. So part of the book title, it says it involves serial killers, amongst other things. The serial killers, so for anybody who doesn't know or is not in the UK, Fred and Rosemary West were a married couple who went on a murderous spree for very, very, very many years, more years than the police realize. And I can tell you that for a fact.
You've stopped. Need to press. Your sound's gone. Joanne, your sound's gone. We can't hear you. It's gone off. We'll get her back on again in a minute, because she's a brilliant lady tonight, as Mason just said. What a brilliant lady tonight. So she's gone off. She'll be trying to get back on now. So, yeah, I've got a lot of questions to ask her as well about the book and everything. She should be with us shortly. I'll just try and... She'll be panicking in the background now. Yeah, we've lost her, unfortunately. I've just sent her a message to click on the link again above. So hopefully we'll get her back on again. Because it's very interesting what she's going to say. Here we go.
My side, Bob.
There you go. You're on again.
I said, I don't know whether that was my side or your side. It looked like it was going, and then suddenly I was talking to myself.
You just stopped.
Where did you last hear me? Can you remember what I said last?
Yeah, you're about Fred West.
Yeah, yes, I remember about that. So when that's right, when he was in the UK, when he still in the army, he came to do a couple of years training for the special forces. He didn't get into that because he ended up breaking both his ankles in the training, poor thing. And so they gave him light duties, still in the army. They didn't, have him out of the army at that time. But on one of these occasions, he was having a break home, and he'd been dropped off in Bristol. Now, Bristol area and Gloucester is the stomping ground of Fred West at
That's
some
right.
points in his life. Not that Mike knew this. He had never heard of Fred and Rosemary West, and this would be circa 1971. The world did not know of Fred West. The only people who knew Fred West and Rosemary West at this time were the neighbors or his family or friends. So bear that in mind. So Mike is dropped off in Bristol, and what he wants to do is to get another lift, hitchhike another lift to the Stourbridge area to his parents' place. And he sees a pub, good old Mike. He says, "Oh, I'll go and ask them which is the best way to go and have a few pints before." So that's exactly what he does. So he goes off and has a few pints, and everybody in the pub is saying to him, "Are you Fred's brother?" Well, he doesn't know who they're talking about and who or what Fred is. He went, "No." And then one of them got a bit rude and said, "Well, your mother must have a bike." And he did get a bit shirty then. I don't blame him. And so those were locals. Those were just locals. And apparently he must have looked extremely like Fred West. Now, Fred West was a good 9 years older than Mike. I think quite a bit bigger, but I've got a couple of images of Fred West and Mike, and you know what? They look scarily alike. Anyway, yeah, they do. I mean, I can show you those afterwards if you want. I don't have them to hand, but they really do look alike. Anyway, so the pub closes, and so he is now, and he's toward the end of his injury, so he can walk without sticks, and he's maybe hobbling along a little bit because he's still in his recovery time, and he sees a little road or lane, and he walks up it. He thinks, well, if I turn off that, there's bound to be a main road. I'll get a lift. So that was his thinking. Now, as he's walking up this lane, a black Mariah kind of vehicle pulls up, and a Mariah is like the old-fashioned black police vehicles, as I'm told.
Yeah.
And we have a picture of that in the book as well, with the sliding doors on the side and the two passenger door. Oh, driver passenger door. So and then the passenger door is pushed open, obviously by the driver, and this rough voice of Rosemary West says, in very rude language, I won't do the rude language.
No.
Bleep, 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 get in then. And then Mike, kind of shocked. Now, Mike is inebriated at this time. He doesn't mind telling us all. He's at a skinful, he's on holiday for the weekend or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so this woman in the big glasses and the bobble hat says, well, get in. And then he opens his mouth to say, is she going his way? Could she drop him off? And of course, she's got this black country accent. And if people don't know what that's like, it's a little bit toward the Birmingham accent, but not quite. Yeah. So that just gives you an idea of the different sound. And the Gloucester Bristol accent is nothing like it. So she went, oh, bleep, 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 who they bleep, 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 who you? And he went, well, I'm just on leave from the army, because he hadn't got his army uniform on, but he's got his army coat on, one of those big coats.
Yeah.
And she said, well, you better FFF get in, because if he sees you pointing to Fred West out in the field with a spade, with an army, if he sees you, it'll be all hell to pay, kind of thing. So he has no idea, and don't forget he's drunk. So in he sits, and she's yattering on, and then they're driving, and all of a sudden he's got a pull on his sleeve from the back. He didn't even know anybody was in the back. And as he turns round, there's a wee girlie there, probably 15 or 16, tied, and her feet are tied, her ankles are tied, and she's protesting, Mister, please help us. She's going to kill us. Help, you've got to help us. Well, Mike was a bit disconcerted by it and thought, what the hell was going on? And Rosemary West burst out laughing and said, oh, ignore her. She's my daughter. She's been on, kind of on the raz with men in Bristol. So I've had to tie her up and bring her back. And so Mike kind of thinks nothing of it for a moment until he's pulled again by her with her little, bound wrists. Mister, please, you've got to help. And she indicates that he needs to look to the floor. And as he does, she gets her feet together, her bound ankled feet together, and lifts up a top that's on the bottom. And there he sees a girl, still as death, probably dead, with her eyes wide open, just lying there. And Mike does not know what to think. He thinks, when I asked him and quizzed him many times about this event, I said, so did you honestly think these girls were messing about? Because that's what he said. He went, yeah. He said, you got to remember, Joanna, I was drunk. He said, all I was thinking about was getting home, getting warm, getting comfortable, getting some sleep, that kind of thing. He said, I had no idea. And of course, now this is very early. This is 1971, 2 at the most. We think it's 71. And so then she drops him off and a lorry picks him up, a truck. And as they're going, the lorry driver says to him, hey, did you come out of that black van? He went, oh, yeah, I did. Yeah, there was a black van that gave me a lift. He went, it's been following us for a while. Well, Mike didn't know why. And then only many years later, he would put 2 and 2 together and go, oh, yeah, they thought I was going to ring the police. That's what he believed later. At the time, he was inebriated. He didn't care about it. He didn't think about it. He wasn't interested. He just thought it was girls joking about and with a crazy mother. That's all. Remember, nobody knew who Fred and Rosemary West were.
No, they didn't.
These were the most heinous killers almost on the planet. I mean, they were shocking. And I'm going to roll forward only just a few years. He's still in Germany, but he's come out of the army, and he's in the year or so he's in Germany. So this would be 74 he was out. So this might be 75, 76. He's living with his wife, and they're just divorcing. His German wife, he got married in a hurry. And they had an agreement that she had the key for the apartment, or whichever way around it was, and he had the one for the building, and blah blah. That's how they worked it. And so he'd been out for just a couple of pints. He said, I wasn't drunk, nothing like that, just a couple of pints, talking about my circumstances and the situation, because he was in Germany, thinking, now God, I've got to get back to England, and worrying all about that. And he realized he didn't have any of the keys to the building with him, apartment or the main building. So then he spies that the cellar window is open a bit, enough for him to get through. Now, the cellar window is great. It goes straight into a cellar, at the end of which is a door that goes into the hallway, and then you're off to whichever apartment you need and whichever floor it's on.
Oh, yeah.
So he knew the cellar. I think he'd been in and out a couple of times, so he was familiar with it. And anyway, so and it's I don't think it's shockingly late at night. It might be 12 or something like that. I'm not quite sure. I'd have to read the book again myself if we put that bit in. And he's getting down sort of stomach first. So he's going down front side first. So he's not facing the room. He's facing the wall where he's coming in through the window. And I say that because he's about to be forced to turn around, because all of a sudden, as he says about 5 feet, 6 feet from the ground, so you don't want to jump too awkwardly, otherwise you could easily, even at that short distance, sprain an ankle. So he was being close. And he said all of a sudden he felt his legs and lower regions were being tugged on, as if something was pulling him, really pulling him, not just a little tap, this was something really dragging him down. And as he sort of squidged himself around to face what it was, I don't know, I can't remember. I was talking to somebody today, and I can't remember if it's the Harrison Ford, oh gosh, it's the Ark of the Covenant one, where all the wraiths and ghouls come out of the Ark of the Covenant. Somebody can tell me what the name of that film is. I can't remember now. Maybe it's the Doom of the Thing of Doom or whatever. Anyway, but he said they were like that. But he said that's the nearest things that these things looked to that were pulling on me. And he said, and not only that, he said the entire room looked different. It didn't look like my cellar anymore. And he said there was a massive black chasm, and these wraith-like ghoulish beings were coming up from there. And they were physical enough to make his physical body feel like it was being pulled down off the ledge of the window.
Right.
And so he said, Joanna, out of all the ET stuff, out of everything that's happened to me, that scared me probably the most.
Probably would do. Scare anybody.
Absolutely. So he's really racking his brain, in the instant, knowing that it feels like a death situation, like he might be pulled to his death. I'm wondering what the hell to do. And so he thinks, well, the only thing I can do is jump down and just leg it, just really run and see if I make it, see if I don't go into the chasm and make it across the floor, which he did. And he did make it. So bear in mind that. And now we're going to come forward, 5 years to 1994, when Fred West, on the 25th of February, I think, was arrested for, I think, only 5 murders at that time. I say only 5 because I've been working with a Dowser, and there's a team working at the area where Mike believes he was. They think they found it, and they found it at least 7 more burials by remote viewing and dowsing.
Oh, God.
Yeah, how amazing is that? So anyway, fast forward, as I said, to 1994, when Fred West was arrested, and the police, it's all over the television, the police are showing the cellar. All of a sudden, Mike goes, oh my God, that's the cellar from Germany when those wraith-like beings were trying to pull me into this chasm. It's the exact same cellar. Whatever was on the walls, the images and whatever were there that Mike saw in his cellar transposed onto this TV. I mean, all of these years later.
Oh, God.
You couldn't make this stuff up. He phoned the police immediately and said, I saw Rosemary, he then suddenly knew, because he can see Rosemary West and see what she looked, and Fred West, and he said, I had a lift from her and bloody blah, and there were these girls. And the police said, oh, we don't go back that far.
Oh.
Apparently, in recent times, and I'm talking about this year, someone's approached the police. I don't know if it's one of our members, the dowsing lot, to the police, to say, or not the police in the Gloucester area, but another, maybe local to where they live, and told that part of the story, and the policeman said, we would never say that. We would never say it's too long ago. Well, they did. One of the things Mike wasn't, he wasn't a liar, ever.
No.
A liar. And so whether the police have that protocol now, I don't know, but they certainly didn't in 1994. I mean, if that had been me, I'd have been around that area like a shot. Because,
definitely.
So we were trying to figure out what this link could possibly be with Fred West and Mike Smith, because they didn't know each other personally. They'd never met, ever.
But they looked alike.
They looked extremely alike. I mean, I can get those pictures, but I didn't bring it on. I don't know if you want to hang on a second. I can certainly do that. But anyway, so, that's an astonishing story. And just to finish off about that stream of thought about the Fred West look-alike business. And although Fred West was from a different part of the country, was born in a different year, 9 years older, bigger, taller, but facially they really did look similar at one point. When he was older, of course, Fred West killed himself in 1995, so we'll never know what he looked like in old age.
Yeah.
And Mike didn't make old age, having died just, as I said, in 2023. But he said he was racked with guilt thereafter about the fate and plight of those young ladies, because he said he might have been able to, who knows, save one of them. But he said, you know, and I questioned him again and again, how could you not possibly think that there was something in it with her being tied and everything? He said, well, Rosemary West said, you know, gave her to him and inebriated him at that time. Don't forget, he's 20 odd years old, you know, 21, 22. He's, you know, he's just not a worldly person, and he wouldn't be thinking heinous things. He's not, you know, he's not that kind of guy. And, but he said it really racked him with guilt thereafter, thinking, wow, there must have been, you know, maybe I could have done something. And, you know, we'll never know the identity of those two young ladies.
No, you wouldn't.
I mean, there are others who are unknown that we have ascribed Fred West's criminality to, his murders to, and but the team, I dip in and out, and
Joanne, do you think there's more to come of that story?
I don't think the police will tell you much more. I might do a little video on that. It depends, you know, because the locations are sensitive, of course, because if you've got a farm and there's public access and suddenly you're, you know, the 7 bodies along that line of your property, it's hard, isn't it? So yeah. It's very, I mean, I don't know how you actually would approach that. You know, I don't have any training in police work or that kind of thing, but I actually do believe it should be followed up with the police. I do believe they should look at the work that we've been doing, Peter Vincent, particularly of the Dowsing Detective films episodes that I've created, that also on the YouTube channel, where he's showing how using color codes with their numerological counterparts, and he can extract unique codes through an ET contact. Believe it or believe it not. And these have proven to be time and again correct. And the guys have been working on other murder crimes by other people as well, and been finding out an astonishing lot of information. But I won't go into those because it's just, oh, you know, it's a lot. It really is a lot.
Oh, it is, yeah. It sounds it.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know if you said at the beginning you had a few questions, if you'd like me to answer some, or I can talk a bit more about another time displacement thing with
I'll just give you Bill described encounters with Nordics, reptilians, greys, and shadow entities, and men in black. Which of these stood out most to you in terms of credibility or impact?
All of them. All of them. And I'll tell you why there wasn't one that stood out more. Because I spent years with Mike, several years, you know, over a period of time, doing these 3 field trips, questioning him constantly and consistently, looking for his answers, looking for insights into all of these beings. I mean, it's hard to swallow. And because I'm a very rational kind of analytical person, it took me a long time to wrap my own head around what he was telling me. It took me a long time to assimilate some of the things he was saying. I'll tell you one of the stories about the Nordics.
Yeah.
So the Nordics were not abductors. They were encounters. There were two. And I'll tell you the older one. So one happened when he was about 5, and one happened when he was about 9 or 10. So that would be in about 1959 or 60. Now, and I've been to all these locations. So Mike said, so Mike was, as I said before, from a very poor family. He had no education. And at that time he was, and he also had a brother who was severely disabled physically. He had his stomach. He was born with his stomach outside, right, which required endless hospital visits, which meant the little sister, whilst his dad was working and his mum was at hospital, he had to look after her and do the cooking and some housekeeping. So that was his lot as a young 9, 10-year-old. You know, from bigger families, you have to just chip in. So he wasn't at school. He didn't go to, I think he spent 6 months at school once when he was about 13 and got kicked out. You know, he just wasn't, that's why he has, you know, little reading or writing ability. But make no mistake, he was a very, you know, clued in guy in lots of different ways. So on this occasion, he used to go to this area which had a canal running through it. I think it was Wordsley. And when I went there with him, there were dog walkers, it was a rolling field, there were houses on one side in which Robert Plant used to live in one of those as well, very interestingly.
Oh, really?
And then there was the canal to the side with the trees. Now, he said, when I was here, and when I was all those years ago, 1959 or 60, he said it was remote. There were hardly the amount of houses built. And it was, this field was sown. It was a farmer's field, and it was sown with crop. And at this occasion, it was also sown with crop. We think it was probably corn, because it was quite tall. And he said, so no, he said, hardly anybody went there. He said, I knew the area like the back of my hand because I would go there most days. And one of the things he loved to do, and he did on this day, was to flatten down part of the crop. And his dad used to say, you want to be careful, a combine harvester will come and wrap, you know, kind of squid you up. Anyway, so he would lie down in his little circle that he'd created and just watch the clouds. And, you know, it was a joy to do. He'd see all the different faces and what have you. And then on this day, all of a sudden, he sees this huge white sphere come flying over him, and it's spinning, circling. And he thinks, well, that's strange. It looks like a balloon, but it's not a balloon. There was no wind that day either. And then another comes. So the two of them are circling around one another, and then they zip off. Well, little Mike thinks, well, wow, that's fascinating. That's really interesting. And he stands up to find himself in probably one of the first documented crop circles I've ever heard of in the UK, at least in modern times.
Right.
And then big crop circle, massive, and he could still see as he stood up little balls creating other field work, artwork, if you like. But in the distance, he could see a landed craft. Now, he didn't put it in this you know, language. And he actually thought it was a very strange craft. You see, nobody had cars around then. There was nobody could afford a car. So any vehicle was very exciting to see. You have to bear the context in mind of the social conditioning of the time and the social conditions of the time. That kind of gives you a bit more balance about an understanding about why this is extraordinary too. So when he saw this craft, he had seen, and there was in England at the time, a man called Donald Campbell, and he had a vehicle called Bluebird, and it was, and he used it for practicing land speed records. You know, it was like a sport.
Coniston water.
And then on water, and sadly he lost his life to one incident involving Bluebird, I think, or a version of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he did. I think he. So anyway, so there he sees this craft, and not only does he see a craft, he sees 4 beings walking towards him. They look humans, they look like a family, you know, mum and dad and 2 smaller ones, but they're all dressed the same in this kind of tight fitting all in one royalish blue color suit, and blonde, very nice looking people, but they appeared to be a little distracted. And they asked him if he had seen any reptilians. Well, little Mike's vocabulary was extremely limited. He didn't know what reptilians were. And he could imagine a reptile, but he had no idea what they were talking about.
Yeah.
He said, I don't actually remember if they said reptilians or reptiles. He said, but in any event, he said, I knew the place like the back of my hand, and I hadn't seen anything unusual. So that was his, you know, protocol for saying no to them. And that, he said, they seemed to, you know, noticeably relax. And then he said, well, you know, where have you come from? And they pointed skyward. He said, oh, are you from God? How sweet is that, eh? And they said, no, that's a concept on your planet, and we can't comment. They also went on to say, we have escaped those masters who would have made us slaves. And there is maybe another line or 2 to go with that, which you'll have to read the book for. Yeah. I thought that was really peculiar. I've never heard any Nordic say anything, be reported to say anything like that. Right? So here we are. And then they say to him, they tell him about the earth being, you know, there are issues with it. There's problems on the earth. And then they say to him, look, would you help with the earth? You know, like make it better or whatever, if you could. He said, oh, yes, what do you want me to do? And they said, well, you'll know at the time, but it will mean that you are likely to be hated in your life. So anyway, little 9 or 10-year-old Mike, you know, that doesn't sort of resonate with him. He doesn't know what that means. He actually was later on in life by those Freemason types and all the rest of that, who tried to have him off the planet sooner than that. Yeah. And so he didn't take much notice of it at the time, but he noted what they said. He even had a notebook, which some years later he wrote it, which I show in the documentary, of the script that he wrote about making, you know, these masters who would have made them slaves, which I wonder if they're not the reptilians. Anyway, we'll come to that part in a minute if we've got time. Yeah. Anyway, so they asked him if he'd like to go for a ride on their craft, and he was so excited. I said, really, you didn't think it at all odd? He said, look, I'd just seen Flash Gordon at the cinema. I thought it was wonderful. You know, and you have to remember, he's a little 9-year-old or 10-year-old boy, and this is the most excitement he's had for a long time, probably. And they were very kind and nice, and the children, he didn't mention those too much, but when they got aboard the craft and they just walked up, there was nothing different about that. And he thinks that they spoke to him verbally, and but he was left with the 2 kids, and I'm not sure of the ages. They weren't terribly small, and they'd got some orange balls or spheres, if you like, and they were moving them, but without touching them, moving them with their mind. And they Mike looked at one of the spheres, and it was near him, and they said, you can do it too. And so he said, oh, okay. And they said, all you have to do is to move it with your mind and direct it. And so he did. And he said, and it happened. It did happen. And so he was quite thrilled about that. But he said, I actually think that they did it for me because I can't do it now. You know, kind of thing. Which is a, you know, kind of a reasonable thing to think. But maybe in that atmosphere, maybe there was a specialized atmosphere on the craft, and it meant that any mental activity was heightened, you know, wherever it was focused. Who knows, right? And so anyway, mum and dad, or mum came to I'm just going to call her mum Nordic, came to get him and took him into a large room, and there was a plinth. There was a kind of 5-foot plinth, and on it looked like something that was kind of resembling a child's spinning top. And it was encased in a kind of a cloche or a perspex cover, a bit like a round cake cover, but you could see through it. And there was a round porthole. And so he said that the man was telling him something about the propulsion system or whatever it was. Probably not propulsion, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And so the craft began to move, and Mike noticed that the faster the craft went, the more this little spinning top was lost to visibility. So it went invisible. And then he actually looked out of the window, the porthole, and he saw the Earth receding at a rate of knots into the distance of the cosmos, wherever they went. And I don't think it was too long, because he said, I noticed the woman give a glance of concern to the man. She said, we have to take him back now. I don't know whether they wanted to keep him or what, but they said, you know, we need to take him back, and they did. And when he was disembarking, he said, well, will I see you again? And they said, look to the clouds. So that was an enigmatic parting. And then he was at this time now cognizant of the time, because he said, oh, gosh, you know, it's time to catch, you know, to go and collect my little sister from school. And he'd come to this area on his bike, and where he'd left his bike, it was no more. And he thought, oh my goodness. And he was worrying and running around, couldn't find it, and thought, I'm just going to have to leg it. I'm just going to have to run. And then as he did one more sweep around to check that his bike hadn't fallen over somewhere, there were the Nordics standing there with his bike. So whether they thought that they could purloin it with, you know, and it wouldn't cause him any, you know, grief or concern, I don't know. But they gave it to him, and and because he was in a hurry now, he didn't say anything else about where did you find my bike, and what were you doing with it, how anything like that, you know, that a researcher would be saying, oh God, you know, I wish he'd asked. So and that was that part of that story. But it would be only about a week later, he was down by the canal, and this canal, which, you know, I think I saw one person when I was there with Mike the time I went, but he said, you know, you'd see nobody ever here. I mean, it was, people would go and fish, but he said they wouldn't fish in groups or anything. He said you'd be lucky if you saw one person, you know, sort of yards or a mile or so up the canal. And so he was alone. So I'm trying to impress upon the on you the understanding that this area, which is common ground now, was at that time hardly used or known by anybody, even the locals. You know, they just, and it was all a woods area nearby as well. And he was standing by the bridge, which is a roundy bridge, hump bridge, not a big one. It's about 8 foot tall at its tallest, I think. And as he's got his fishing rod in the water, which is only probably about 9 foot deep, he's waiting for a bite, and he suddenly sees, he's like, I mean, when I took him back to the area, which he hadn't been into since he was a kid, like he said, it was scary, you know. It was scary because suddenly there across I think the canal was no more than 4 meters wide, possibly 5, no more than that. Across from him with these 4 or 5 very large, maybe 7 or 8 foot tall reptilians. And one got into the water, and all we can see is we've got a little drawing. John Dean did a drawing for us for the book, is this part up, so from his nose sort of upwards, this ruched head that certainly doesn't look human. And Mike said, you know, and the weird thing is, I don't remember the water rippling. I don't remember any movement in the water when they were in. There was no, you know, if anybody else went in the water, there'd be ripples, there'd be or whatever. But he said, I saw no movement. And he said, and when he locked eyes with the reptilian, I said, well, how near were you? He said, about 5 foot. He said, and then I remember nothing. I remember nothing until sometime very much later, when his fishing rod he found was way down the road there, you know, the canal area there. and the poor fish that had caught itself on it, its whole, it was a horrible mess because it had been there for a long time and couldn't escape. And that wasn't the last time he saw the reptilians. He saw them about two or three times again. Yeah. So, I mean, and this is in Stourbridge, for goodness sake.
Question I'm going to ask you: do you think we are chosen to see these beings?
I think there's something like a frequency field that is an aggregate of the very many lives we live and have lived, which maybe has certain frequencies to other life forms.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that gives certain people the ability to tune in, even inadvertently, to those kinds of beings. I mean, who knows? I'm not quite sure, Bob, to be honest, because I don't know if a physicist or a mystical, metaphysical person could, or a spiritual person could really, sort that one out. But when like I said with the Fred West thing, going back to that incredible, likeness at one point in his life, I wonder if it could create, because it was a physical structure and bone, and of course then we have all the chemistry of our body, which is the salt, that's very conductive, and the plasma and the bone itself, all that makes up that, and that chemical structure together creates this sort of, as I said, sort of a standing wave. I could be way off point here, but trying to make sense of how these two disparate beings could possibly have their paths cross in this paranormal, style. I don't know, but it is beyond bizarre. I mean, and the cellar incident is just off the charts. And the fact that Mike actually recognized it 24, 25 years later, because it brought everything back to him in sharp relief. It's like when memories come back from the abductions and the encounters, they often come back in dribs and drabs, and then there may be a trigger which brings down a whole load more. It's pretty astonishing and mind-boggling. I don't know if we have, or maybe I should just say for myself, I have the capacity to encompass the various strata of information that would allow me to understand and assimilate, cognize completely how that happened. And also, you hear it all the time with alien abduction or any abduction, even the MyLab one, that there is this memory hole business going on, but that at certain times, certain things can be triggered. You might be washing up, and suddenly some little sound or music, pertaining to an event that happened, suddenly comes front and center to your consciousness. So it's an interesting one, isn't it? It's difficult to know a definitive answer. I don't have a definitive answer at all, but the best I can come up with is the one that I cited, Fred West and Rosemary West, and the lookalike thing. And for anybody who doesn't know who Fred West is, go and check it out. It's very interesting. It's beyond bizarre.
Oh, God, it is, yeah.
Beyond bizarre.
Really?
And the fact that our dowsing detective and remote viewers are finding resonances of more bodies and relating them to Fred. Who was it? Was he burying somebody out there already at the time that Rosemary West gave Mike a lift, or was he going to bury that girlie that was under the tarp? We don't know.
Was it? Yeah, exactly. We don't know, do we?
We don't know. And the police were definitely not interested in 1994. I can tell you that. But I don't know if they'll do anything about it now, because that area which we've gleaned, not myself, I take no credit for that at all, but people in the dowsing remote viewing team have been working really, really hard, and even creating a spreadsheet listing, documenting Fred's, every element of Fred's life, where he lived, because he was in Scotland at one point as well, and there were murders there. Of course, you've got other murderers there too, but we think that one or two were down to Fred West, because in the coding that Peter Vincent can do, linking with 44 for the answers, you get a unique identifier. So my coding and ID will never be the same as yours. It's like an iris scan, never the same. They could be similar, but they won't be the same. And that's why you can find, how to say this. So, okay, I'll just say it. So part of the work that Peter has done as well is on missing people. And we found that some of the missing people have been subjected to organ harvesting. I'm not going to go into it here, but what I will say is that from that, he's been able to track the body part resonating to the original person elsewhere. And in fact, maybe 2 or 3 times. If they've got a heart, a liver, a kidney, then you've got 3 other people hosting the same frequency as well as their own,
right,
as the person who was the donor, by design or nefarious means, I will say. So nothing can be hidden.
No, it sounds like it.
Not with remote viewing and not with dowsing. Can't be hidden. Really? And it's very interesting. If people go and look at the Dowsing Detective series, you'll hear Peter tell you that he and 2 colleagues were at was it the British Museum? One of the big museums. I'm going to say it's the British one. It might not be, but one of the big museums in London. And they were tested, blind tested, with their skills, and they were right every single time. So if they're right there, why would they be wrong elsewhere?
Correct. Exactly.
And they've also done a lot more besides what I'm telling you about. But
I can imagine they have as well.
Well, also we found ET. We found ancient resonances of ET. It's very exciting stuff. I really should create a film, not just the episodes, with Peter Vincent as well, because it's mind-blowing stuff. But people don't seem to be that interested. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's an interesting subject, is that?
So was there, did you, because I know we're an hour and a half now, Bob, and I'm aware of your time, because you said about an hour.
Yeah, we're about, that's about it now. But
yeah, loads of other things that,
if anybody wants to find you or get interested or get your books, where can they get in touch with you?
Well, the books are on Amazon, and I'll just quickly list them off. So there's 44. That's based on an ex-soldier's true story of lifelong abductions involving men in black, a serial killer, and persecution by the Freemasons. It's amazing. In 2020, I wrote a fun book, No ETs in Sight, about 2 crazy girls going off on a holiday. I mean, it's true, we did, for 2 months to France and Spain, but we were novices in the old camper van department, and we hired, because we could only afford it if we hired a second-hand camper van, from a private person, and not from some souped-up place. That would have cost about 4 or 5 grand just in insurance. But we had a kind of down-at-heel camper van, which we called Elvira, which caused us all kinds of troubles, and she was duct taped together pretty often.
Oh yeah, God, she was, yeah.
So it's a bit of a travelogue. We give descriptions and of the places and the kind of food. And my friend wasn't a vegetarian, but I am. And she said, for the 2 months, you know, never mind, I'm going to be a vegetarian with you, and then we don't have to faff about the food.
Oh, right,
And
brilliant.
so each place we went to, we made a dish related to the area, like Granada goulash or whatever it was. And so there's all of these beautiful recipes, really quick, simple, nutritious remedies cited in there for anybody who's interested. And it's only a small book, and it's just a lot of fun was had by that. And then I wrote in 2023 my autobiography, which is told in a series of short stories, which does go into the UFO stuff and into some of the weird and wonderful adventures that I unwittingly would find myself in. And the ET Newsroom is the main website. The ET Newsroom .eclectia release is for the Eclectia website. And I'm also a regression therapist along the way. I did that in many years ago. And so there's, again, the ET Newsroom, wixsite.com, and regression therapy, I think, is the, you'll probably see all links to those places from the major ET Newsroom site anyway, if you want. And if anybody wants to drop a line, you can do it to the ET Newsroom, the ET Newsroom at gmail.com. So,
right, lovely. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. I know it's been a long time coming, but it's been well worth it tonight. It's been wonderful.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And if you want any more stories from anybody else, including Mike's other stories, then I'm happy to come on again. So,
oh, thank you for that. I will do in the new year sometime again.
Yeah, well, I know you'll be busy with that, but anyway, it's a delight to meet you again, Bob. I remember lovely to meet you back in 2019. I'm pretty sure it was then. And thanks for keeping on.
Yes, so thank you again.
All right, my dear. Well, let me know when this goes out, and I'll send it out to one or two people I know as well.
It's great. It's live tonight anyway.
Okay. Oh, of course it is. Yes.
It's on YouTube now.
Fantastic.